I think you can drink on screen. We're good. So hello. I'm here with Bill Hartman of IFAST, a great physical therapist, and I'm really excited to sit down and talk with him because in April, on the 16th and 17th, we're holding the first Strength Faction seminar, and Bill is our special guest, and we're pumped for that because I won't say it. I mean, Bill won't say it, so I'll say it for him. I really think that Bill is probably the smartest guy in the industry, and he's shaking his head already, but I really think that he is. So I'm excited to. Well, I'm honored that I get to share the same presentation stage with Bill for a weekend and work with him, and then also get to soak up everything that he's going to say because we're giving him a whole day to do his thing. So I wanted to just get on the line with him first and kind of chat and give you guys a preview of kind of what's coming, but also just pick his brain because I'm selfish and I want to know what he knows. So Bill, Bill, thanks for taking some time, man.
No worries, man. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
So absolutely. So Bill and I were chatting a little bit earlier about actually, you know what? When we were when Chris and I came out for the Joel seminar, we were talking about different training modalities and maybe some things that were underutilized and overutilized, and we started to kind of go down a rabbit hole there, and we didn't really finish digging the hole. So
right.
I'm curious, I think a lot of times I can personally say growing up in the powerlifting gyms and playing football until I was in my 20s, that I've always been a really strength heavy guy, mainly because it's fun and that's what I'm good at. But I mean, do we need as much of it as we profess that we do, or maybe traditionally that we've believed that we do as far as strength training and building strength? Is it as important as we make it out to be?
Let's go back to that day that we were in the gym and you got to sit in on our little discussion that we have on our Friday afternoons and such. And you and I both hit on the word context pretty much at the same time. And I think that context is the determining factor as to how valuable strength training really is and how much of it you need. It's like, what are we talking about? When we talk about, strength is good for athletes, it's like, well, good for what? When you think about it, think about the forces that go through your body when you're landing. It's multiple times body weight, depending on like what type of contact we're talking about, whether it be double leg, single leg, what height we're coming down from. Are we moving horizontally? Are we moving vertically? But what you're going to see is that the forces are so significant that it is far beyond anything that we can produce from a strength standpoint in the gym. If I jump and land, let's just say it's 5 times my body weight, and I'm about 200 pounds. So that's 1,000 pounds. Well, I'm not much of a 1,000-pound squatter. I mean, I could do one explosive eccentric with 1,000 pounds on my back. That's about the extent
of an explosive eccentric.
And then after you wipe, I just turn into a big stain on the floor. But seriously, it's like, okay, so of what value is it for me to be able to squat 350 pounds if the force that I have to absorb is 3 times that? Okay, so is that type of strength training really going to transfer to the activity that I'm performing? Is it of significant value? And then you think about, well, okay, how long is my foot on the ground? So if I'm sprinting and if I'm at top speed, the moment of ground contact is minute. It's so small that it's impossible for me to produce maximal force, or my absolute force. I just don't have time, all right, to demonstrate that. So again, is strength training of value? It's like, is the fastest guy in the race the strongest guy? Chances are no, if we're talking about top speed mechanics. Now, when we talk about acceleration, now maybe I do have an element that I can actually transfer some strength training towards because my ground contact times are much longer. I have more time to demonstrate that strength. I need to overcome inertia. I need to overcome my own body weight. So in those instances, when we talk about context and transfer, then maybe I do have an element where I can utilize that strength training effectively. But we can't just say across the board that, okay, yeah, you need more strength. right? And we also know that if I spend too much time spending on my slow speed strength, that I'm going to make myself slower. And that's just an unfortunate reality. It doesn't always transfer. And I think one of the reasons that it gets overutilized is because, one, it's pretty darned easy to measure, right? If I squat 5 pounds more this week than I did last week, I am stronger, even though there's an element of coordination that has to take place, that nobody really talks about. And that's a very specific demonstration of strength. It doesn't necessarily mean that I have transferred that strength into any other activity. In fact, if you think about it, when we talk about transfer and what we do, and we work with athletes, and don't tell anybody else this, and I'm sure nobody else is going to be listening to this ever, we really don't have any test that tells us whether we have done anything that transfers to any other activity, right? We can talk about performance tests like, oh yeah, so-and-so dropped their 40 time by, 1/10 of a second, or we added 4 inches to our vertical jump. But tell me how that transfers in a game, right? Can you really prove to me that in the middle of the second quarter, the fact that I increased his vertical jump by 4 inches when he was fully rested during a testing situation, that I now transferred that to the game and I made him better at demonstrating his athletic potential? We really can't even prove that. And that doesn't mean that we don't have value in what we do, but a lot of the things that we do don't necessarily transfer. Strength training is just one of those things. But because it's so measurable and it's relatively easy to improve, and I'm not talking about the effort component, I'm just talking about structure. All we got to do is put a little bit more weight on the bar every week, and we get stronger, in our exercises. But I think that there are so many other elements that we need to work on, especially with athletes, that we probably spend a little bit too much time valuing the strength side of things, when really you think about like rate of force development, the ability to decelerate. We talk about muscles that during sprinting, hamstrings function almost isometrically, during a sprint. We don't talk about that very much, but we got guys doing glute ham raises saying, oh, you're making your hamstrings stronger, but we're strengthening them in the wrong context. Right? We're using the wrong type of contraction. If we really want to strengthen a hamstring for sprinting, it better be in an isometric position, because that's really how it's going to be functioning. So again, there's a lot of things that we do with strength training that, again, I just think we overvalue or maybe overuse because it is so measurable. Does that make sense?
It makes total sense. And I think it's, I think from a value standpoint that philosophy is undervalued. I think that we don't examine that enough. But that makes me curious, though, because while I agree with you, in what context is making improving absolute strength valuable? So I don't. If you need more information, to make that question more specific, we can do that. But is when you find that context and say, I'm making the glass bigger, or no, because that's the common analogy, right? That strength makes the glass bigger. When is that? When is it appropriate? When is that a good?
But let's think of all the other adaptations that come along with strength training, right? There appears to be, in looking at literature and through experience, there appears to be an improvement in the durability of an athlete by getting them stronger. And you said, but think of all the potential adaptations we're talking about. We're talking about, connective tissues, tendon strength, tendon stiffness, and transferring that to performance, because there are certain scenarios where we do want a stiffer non-contractile element that's going to improve performance. So I think there's elements of that certainly transfer. But again, I think we suck at measuring a lot of these things, and again, I'm not devaluing it. I'm just saying that it might be overutilized when we could also be working on other things that maybe we're a little bit better at transferring to another activity. I just don't. Again, maybe it comes from the fact that we refer to ourselves as strength coaches or strength and conditioning coaches, like as if that's some element that's separate from everything that we do. I mean, there's coordination elements, there's elasticity elements, there's reactivity elements, there's energy system elements that all go into this. regardless of what activity we're performing, all those elements are a component of everything that we do. But again, because it's just so easy to put weight on the bar, that again, I just look at it as an overutilization or overemphasis, or maybe it's because we all come from kind of the same place that we love to get stronger in the gym, and therefore we, sort of project that onto the people that we work with.
100%. I totally agree with that. So if I'm hearing it, it's more of like when you're looking at strength, we're looking at that the acceleration component, and we're looking at armor building and resiliency, and those are the most tangible benefits that we can really apply to it.
Yeah, I think those are the elements that we've at least seen demonstrated, I think, most effectively. And I'm willing to be wrong here. I don't read everything that is possibly available. But again, I would say that those are probably the two largest components that I see, because you think about, like, okay, when am I ever able to demonstrate anything remotely close to the force that I can produce? Well, my foot has to be on the ground in most cases. I have to be pushing off of something. How much time do I have to do that? We think about rates of force development and such. It's like those things happen very, very quickly. Explosive strength is very, very quick. And rarely do I get to demonstrate that strength that I've accumulated. However, like I said, we got to consider the protective element of it too, because you talk to other coaches, and these are not published research projects, but they do keep their statistics, and the guys that show up for their off-season strength training programs tend to get injured a lot less than the guys that don't, and that's a really cool element. When we talk about, everybody's always concerned about injury prevention, and we always talk about movement qualities and things like that, when the real element just might be, hey man, show up and get a little bit stronger, and now you're more resilient. Now you can withstand all these stressors that we're going to have to apply in the season. When you think about like the fatigue rates and the stress levels just of performing in and of itself, and the variable intensities and all those things, if we can make anybody more resilient, and if it comes down to strength training, then by all means we're going to utilize it. But again, let's not, let's put it in its place, I guess, would be
Sure. I think this is a really uncomfortable transition for a lot of people, moving from this and actually hearing that, and from all the people that we know that are kind of leading the way in a different direction, kind of the way that you and Mike do things at IFAST, and kind of Joel's philosophies and these kind of things. So as we look at that, what are we seeing that transfers more specifically to performance than just strength training? What are you guys, through your work at IFAST and your assessments and your training and reassessments, are you seeing that, hey, this is actually taking us from the gym and giving them better performance?
Well, like I said, I think we really suck at being able to actually prove that we transfer anything. I think what we have to do, and what we're kind of stuck doing, at least in our realm, is that we have to utilize the same performance tests that everybody else does, maybe with a few tweaks. We're doing a lot of stuff with velocity-based training, but we're also using it to measure with. So when we have somebody come in their initial assessment, we're actually measuring velocities of different types of jumps that we'll utilize that appear, and I have to say appear because again we can't measure this, but it appears to correlate with some of the movement-based tests that we have always done and relied on. So if we'll see like a frontal plane asymmetry, so we'll see a kid that maybe doesn't utilize right hip the same as left hip, and so as he jumps off his right foot, we'll see the pelvis drop on the opposing side as he lands, and not even be able to return to a level pelvis as he jumps with that right foot on the other side. And we'll see just the entire opposite, where we'll see that opposite side of the jump side pelvis elevate very effectively, and he lands and he pops right off that foot. So we see this asymmetry dynamically that we've actually already measured on the table with some of our movement-based tests. When we see the movement-based test change, a lot of times we see the dynamic test change. Now, not every time, because again, sometimes we have capacity-related issues, and it's not just a position or recruitment pattern issue that's associated with the position of the joint. So get the joints in the right place, then develop the capacities, versus trying to superimpose capacity on a situation that they just can't control yet. So again, I think that we're stuck like everybody else is. We have to rely on performance tests just like everybody else. Say, okay, that program worked. All right, we achieved something that we had intended to achieve. Whether that transfers to the field or the court, that's the measurement deficit that we just don't have. We just can't tell. And again, of what value is that singular test in a scenario where we superimpose like a game-related fatigue on? You know, I read a study a long time ago that indicated that more injuries occur in soccer in the first half of the season, in the second half of the game, and the thought process is that a lot of these athletes came in and they weren't appropriately conditioned, and they were sort of playing their way into shape throughout the season. And so early on in the season, when they were tired in the second half of the game, they were more likely to get injured. And you know that from the literature that we see that if we fatigue somebody, we lose all sorts of motor control. Pick something: spine, knee, ankle, all these areas. We just lose that motor control that we started with when we were in a non-fatigue state. So to say that it transfers to the game, are we properly conditioning these guys? And then we look at our injury rates.
Yeah. So I guess what I'm hearing you say is that what we can really say is that we give them the raw materials. We can help develop raw materials, and beyond that, that's just our job. Take this, make sure it's resilient, make sure things are working the way that they should, and then beyond that, God had his hand in things, and then there's the other performance aspect of things, that of them going and playing their sport.
Yeah, because I think that to a certain degree, and again, I have to comment on my own little world and how we have to do things, because of the technologies that we have available to us and the ones we can utilize. It's like we don't have something that tells us that, okay, in the second half of the game, this is what your power output's going to be. We just don't know. It's not predictable. In fact, it's very unpredictable, and that becomes the bigger issue of how many elements of this person's life can I control to achieve the desired outcome. Because if Joe Bob only gets 6 hours of sleep the night before the big game, and it comes down, it's the third quarter, is he the same guy as he was last week? When he had 8 hours of sleep prior to the game? Is he going to perform the same way? Does he have the same capacities? We just don't know these things, and again, it's so variable. I can't imagine that we would ever be totally clear on that. But again, maybe there's technology that we, again, I just don't have the capacity to utilize that can provide us more of that information. I just don't know.
Yeah. So what's the breakdown? Let's say, for your normal high school athletes that you guys have, like, where are you guys spending your time besides teaching them to drink diet caffeine-free Mountain Dew through a straw? Through a straw. What I mean, because obviously, what's that?
The straw keeps me neutral.
Fair enough, man. So, I mean, what's it looking like? Where are we at with your kids?
Honestly, I wish I could say that we do this percentage of this and this percentage of that, but because of the structure of the way that we do things, and we have the ability and time to individualize as much as possible. I wish I could say that we spend a certain percentage on strength, we spend a certain position on reactivity, we did a certain amount of time on movement-based stuff. It really just depends on the kid, because we don't have to train people in these large groups, and more power to the guys that are successful with it. We were having dinner with one of the NFL strength coaches who was here for the combine, and I don't want that job. I don't want 60 guys in the weight room, at one time, with 2 or 3 coaches trying to make sure that everybody moves well, uses good technique, and then trying to coach them through any number of drills all at the same time. I mean, I can't imagine how hard that job is. We just don't have that problem because of the way that we do things. Everything's done individually, and there's certain commonalities that we're going to see in certain groups of kids that we can put together. But I don't know. Unless we talk about like a specific kid and we say, well, what are you doing for him? That
Right.
kind of thing. I will say that when you talk about like the 13, 14, year old kids, they don't move as well. So we probably spend a little bit more time on movement based stuff and probably not a lot of pure strength oriented stuff.
Sure.
And we've actually had a little bit of a discussion about this again recently, because we've been talking about how we're utilizing strength training. Are we using it too much? Are we not using it appropriately? And we might have like one of those kids come in and they might have one or two primary lifts. And then the rest of the time we're working on movement-based activities because that's what their primary need is. It doesn't matter if I load these kids up, and they unfortunately come from a lot of programs that do that, where they have to work with 40 kids at a time, and these kids are getting lost in the shuffle, so to speak. But I don't have the perfect answer for you or the wonderful answer. Like, do 25% movement, 25% reactivity, and 50% strength training.
Sure. I guess it's more of like you have your menu of things, and it just proportionally fades back and forth depending on the situation, which is beautiful. It's awesome to be in a situation where you can program for people like that.
Yeah,
but
it is actually, and it is a wonderful thing. And I know people are sort of stuck in certain scenarios where they don't have that luxury. But that's the difference between our ability to sort of create the environment that we want, and then having to work in an environment that you want to work in, and then having to basically, make consolations, I guess, as to what you can and cannot achieve within the allotted time. Think about this. So, colleges have a limited number of hours that they're allowed to work with athletes. Pros have the same restrictions. It's not like they can come in and they work for 8 hours. They actually have restrictions on what they can and can't do. So they're making compromises on a regular basis as to what they can do, even with the professional level. And we just don't have that problem.
Yeah. That's great to think about too. I mean, but I'm also curious though, beyond your athletes, you guys have general pop too, because I mean,
Absolutely.
I know I've seen them there.
Sure.
So
yeah, they do sneak in every once in a while.
Yeah. It was pretty cool. It was like you had a few pro soccer players in there, and then there was like mom and pop Benetti in there that are like 85 years old hanging out. So it's Benetti's a completely. I just said that. That's not even real.
We don't have any Benettis at my place.
But yeah, in Indiana. But no, I'm curious. Like, so what about because I know, especially at BSP Nova, there's a lot of Gen Pop, and I know a lot of people that are becoming to the Strength Faction seminar, a lot of Gen Pop. So what about them? Where does strength training, is it a longevity thing for them? Is it the force that really drives physical change the quickest because of the adaptations, or where does it fit for them? Because I think that's still a population where sometimes we maybe still get a little too strength heavy.
Yeah, well, and I won't disagree with that, but think about it from this standpoint. It's like that's sort of the one way that we can provide the greatest element of intensiveness, so a perception of how hard people are working. And again, what I was complaining about before about how we overutilize strength training because it's easy to measure, but it's also a great measurement tool for the general pop because they can see the change, and that's motivating. If they come in and they were using a 16-pound kettlebell for their split squat, and now they're using, a 24, then that's progress to them. And so again, in that sense, getting some weight on the bar is motivating. Now,
Sure.
We don't necessarily turn every session that they do into, all we're doing today is deadlifts, bench press, and squats. We start a lot of times with a primary lift for that day, and then we do some supportive stuff for that. And we do some auxiliary lifts, but they're all doing movement-based stuff. They're all doing, some repositioning and breathing based stuff that we know from a health standpoint is going to be helpful. So we always want to take those things into consideration. But again, we have to kind of look at their goals that they've set for themselves. Discuss how our system can benefit them in ultimately reaching those goals. It might seem to be skewed a little bit more towards strength, but if you look at the programming itself, there's a tremendous amount of just movement-based stuff in there. Again, we can't separate energy systems from any of those activities. So, if we bring in a Gen Pop client who is concerned with body composition, they're doing a variety of activities, and they're doing it on time-based intervals, and it looks like strength training to the general public, but we could probably skew it towards, well, our intent is that we want to extend the duration of this activity to stress the energy systems a little bit more, or we're trying to influence the hormones that they're releasing. If we want to get somebody above anaerobic threshold, what's the safest way for me to do that, where I can create a stimulus that may actually cooperate with their dietary activities and promote fat loss? How do I do that? Well, if I got somebody that comes in that's overweight, hasn't been athletic in a really long time, how do I generate that type of intensity? Well, then I got to rely on my strength training.
Sure.
So it's very useful in that respect.
So what I'm hearing is it's a variable tool. We can cross across different spectrums with them. Psychologically, it creates an awareness in a couple of different ways. So it gives us a means for them to sit there and have some, while we elicit intrinsic motivations in other ways, having that extrinsic motivator of seeing progress is good. And then the context of what hard work really feels like. And I think that that's important, because I don't think a lot of people, I was talking about this with somebody a couple weeks ago, is until you get to a certain point, you don't really understand RPE. You think everything's a 9 until you get to a certain context of strength and really understand what it's like to work hard.
Yeah. It's really interesting. That concept is really important. And again, not to pick on a group, but when you bring in your female clients into the gym for the first time, and especially if they don't have any experience with strength training, you're absolutely right. They really don't have any perception of how hard something is. The really cool thing about some of the ladies that we get to work with is they come in with this preconceived notion as to what strength is and how hard they're working. And then the next thing you know, they're asking, it's like, okay, what do I have to do to get a double body weight deadlift? Little things like that. And yeah, it's really cool. And so we have teenage girls that can do chin-ups and push-ups and heavy deadlifts, and they start to appreciate how hard it really is. The women that are initially afraid of strength training because they think it's somehow easy to put on muscle. Sure. The old accidental muscle thing that they're always afraid of. It's like, oh, I don't want to get big and bulky. It's like, okay, well, good luck with that. And you and I both know how hard it is to put on an ounce of muscle, let alone several pounds. But they learn within a relatively short period of time, as they start to put weight on the bar and they see the numbers go up, as to, okay, this is really hard to make this change, but now I have a way that I know that I can do this, and it skews their perception away from these pink dumbbell activities, I would call them, where they're intentionally reducing the relative intensity to where they're really starting to push the intensity without that fear or without that concern. So those are really cool changes. And again, you don't get that with aerobic activity. You don't get that with the group training classes. Group training classes are hard, but when they're not putting weight on the bar and they don't see those numbers change, it's a different type of intensity. Like I said, it's an intensiveness. It's that perception of how hard I'm actually working.
Yeah, that's a great transition to see too. To see somebody actually take heart to it and start wanting to do that. It's a beautiful thing. So, but I think it's great. I mean, it's just I think the key word that you and I always come back to pretty much every time we talk to each other is context. So in what context are we using a tool, and rather than just being a hammer and everything's a nail, understand a little bit more broadly why you're using something. And I think you do a little bit better.
Yeah, I agree.
It's awesome. Well, I'm really looking forward to April. I'm excited.
Me too. Me too. Sounds like it's going to be a really good group of people there.
Yeah, that'll be amazing. And like I said, quite selfishly, I have all of Sunday to just sit there and listen to you talk, and I don't have to do anything. So that'll be awesome.
Well, you know, I get to be the student the day before too, so I'm pretty excited about that.
That's good. Yeah, it's going to be a great weekend. It's going to be a good environment. So I'm really excited for it, and I really appreciate you taking the time tonight, Bill, to chat with me. So
Absolutely.
awesome. Well, we will talk to you soon. Thanks again, Bill.
All right, man.